Getting anywhere new? Perhaps you've hit a plateau that has you asking, is this it? Have you accomplished all you've set out to do in life and are not feeling as fulfilled as you thought you would? It is normal at midlife to reassess what's working for you and what's not. It's also normal to want to reclaim your time, your energy, and your joy. Let's make the best out of the second half of our lives by having more fun, experiencing more peace, and feeling more joy. If any of this resonates with you, then this podcast is for you. I'm Megan Bayless-Bartley. Now let's get ready to shift our shit. Hello and welcome back to the SOS podcast. I am so excited about our guest today. I'm Megan Bayless-Bartley. I own the Mindfulness Center. And today we have one of our team members, Britt Riddle, who's here to join us. Welcome, Britt.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes. And so, you know, in our season 1, Rob helped us to kind of start off the episode with some fun little things. And so I'm wondering if today was a fruit, and not, you know, the flavor of the fruit. What fruit would it be for you today?
I think today would be a really ripe strawberry. I slept really well last night and I woke up and my very first thought this morning was the sun is shining. I could see it through the blinds.
Yes.
And so,
and that's, I can taste that strawberry now. I wonder if our listeners can taste that. That's something that's so cool about, you know, talking about sensory things, is that a lot of times we can imagine that really red, juicy strawberry and then what it feels like to touch it, the seeds and the skin, and then smell and the taste of a ripe strawberry. So I like that. This is good. I was thinking about this actually on my way into the office today. And for me, it's pineapple. And it might have changed because, you know, for all you out there listening to this podcast, you may not realize how difficult it can be sometimes from the technology end. So I want to give Britt a much thank you to being patient with me this morning, because it took us about 45 minutes to an hour to actually get all of our tech set up this morning. And so we're just going to have fun and roll with this and hope that all goes well. But pineapple, I was thinking about pineapple because I dropped my daughter off at volleyball camp this morning, and she likes to play music in the car and kind of get her like pump up music going. And it's all like Rihanna and Taylor Swift, and it's just like fun poppy music. And there was something about it to me that was like tangy, like how it's like tropical, or you know, I guess maybe pineapple isn't so exotic, but there was something about that. But so and I'm wondering, people now thinking about pineapple, you know, if you hold a whole pineapple, you can feel like the rough outside of the pineapple. But when you open that up, it's very juicy and soft and smells and tastes wonderful. So a little bit of mindfulness.
Of hospitality as you're hosting the podcast.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that. Okay. Well, good. Well, okay. So Britt, let me tell you a little bit about Britt. Here's what I know about Britt, and she can correct me. Britt is our newest team member at the Mindfulness Center, and she has a ton of education in various fields that I will let her tell us a little bit about. But most recently, she got her master's in marriage and family therapy. So she is working, she's a therapist and working towards her hours to become fully licensed. And we're having a great time getting to know Britt in supervision. And she's got a wonderful therapy style and so much uniqueness, Britt. I honestly, there's nothing like boring about you. Like, honestly, like there's always something new that I learn from you, which you're such a calming presence. Like, I see you as like this very grounded, you know, you feel very calm and centered and grounded to be around, which I appreciate, because sometimes I can be off in idea land, and you and I have some good conversations sometimes about ideas. But you have just a really rich background, and I am hoping that you'll share some of that with us today. So where do you want to start? What do you think is important for us to know about you?
I was thinking about this morning, and as I drive to work every day, as I drive to the office, I think I may have shared with you recently that I just learned that I'm a 10th generation Louisvillian, and that my drive from my home to here is right across the land that my 10th generation ancestors lived on. And that's been something I've been doing a lot of ancestry work recently. And that's been something that's been really fun. And moving back to Louisville has been a really, in some ways, a grounding experience.
Well, very cool. Were you born in Louisville?
I was, yeah.
Okay, but you've been away. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so I lived in South Carolina and Virginia for 10 years, and then moved back to Western Kentucky before coming back to Louisville. And all of that was either education or congregations. I was an ordained minister for I was minister for about 15 years, ordained for it's been 11 years now, and served in congregations mostly in Virginia and Western Kentucky, and really enjoyed a lot of that work, and found myself most drawn to the moments of what I call deep spaces, hospital rooms, nursing homes. This may sound really strange. I really enjoy doing funerals, and being in those spaces, those sacred spaces with families who are grieving and celebrating and all the things all at the same time.
Yes, very, very, a lot of complicated feelings, right? Which I've talked on this podcast before about. I've done a deep dive for a couple of years before I had kids, reading everything I could get my hands on about death and dying, because I just that's a really fascinating topic for me. And I'm sure you continue to, research and listen and, sit with what all that means to you, but also hold the space for what it means for whoever you're around.
Definitely, yeah.
One thing I asked before we came on, because Britt also has a master's in divinity, losing my words, and a doctorate of ministry, which technically makes her, she has a doctorate, which makes her a doctor. And I asked her, shall we call you Dr. Britt Riddle or Dr. Riddle? And you said?
I said Reverend Doctors. I usually only use the doctor if I use the Reverend.
Okay.
Because they're in the same field, and yeah, and I was in congregations where we didn't use our titles at all, so I'm not even used to hearing those words.
Right. Well, and what's interesting is, I know a lot of women who do have their doctorate, and a lot of them don't even, they might sign their, so-and-so PhD or, DMin or whatever, but they don't ever say Dr. Smith or whatever, and so I'm curious, I'm always curious about that. Is that because you want to be relatable, you want to be, more, I don't know, what is that about?
Yeah, I think part of that was my own training and just experience in the congregations I was in. I was in very relational focused congregations where we just didn't use titles. I was an associate pastor most of my career, and senior pastors didn't use them either. And but that is interesting. I think that's definitely there's something there with gender. And I know that even the seminary that I went to for my Master of Divinity had a conversation amongst the faculty to go by first names or titles and last names like you typically would at school. And the women were the ones who pushed for the title to stay with the titles and the last names, because they had fought hard to get their PhDs in theology and stuff, and that was important to them.
Very good. Interesting. And so now are you associated with a congregation right now? Like, are you a reverend at a congregation, or how does that work?
No, in the denomination I was in, I still have my ordination, and I occasionally do funerals for people who don't have ministers in the community, and who are looking for that. But I currently attend the Quaker meeting here, which doesn't have any kind of ordained leadership, and so that's been a really nice shift for me to step out of leadership. I had been in leadership. I started working in congregations just even as like a part-time summer job when I was 16, and those were really the only jobs that I had. And so it's been a nice shift to sit and be in community with people, without being in charge of, responsible for leading that space.
Yes. And I too have had interest, I've been campus ministers with the Presbyterian Church throughout my career, and went to Presbyterian Seminary for my master's in marriage and family therapy. So I get what it's like to be in, clearly you've done it on a much bigger scale, but, being sort of in that responsible space, one for like faith type issues, but also for emotional and mental well-being, right? Of like just being okay, and maybe finding, people finding themselves and their own belief system and everything. So I'm curious how you made the transition from reverend of or associate pastor, and now you're a therapist. What transpired? Tell us the juicy details. Come on.
Yeah, I think therapist had always been in the back of my mind. When I got my Master of Divinity degree, there was an opportunity to do a dual degree with a clinical social work degree, and I thought about that pretty seriously and chose not to. It was just not the right time for me. That was not the right time for that kind of work for me. I had other things I needed to work through myself before I knew I could do that work, and so. But it was kind of in the back of my mind, and so congregational ministry had so many great moments with the people that I was with in community, and at the same time it had so many exhausting moments where I felt like I was on call 24/7 all the time, and the intensity of caring for hundreds and hundreds of people in the best of times, and in the hardest times of life, at birth, at death, and everything in between. And I found myself, as you were talking about earlier, starting to feel more and more ungrounded. My nervous system, I could tell that I was dysregulated. My nervous system was dysregulated more and more and more. And my anxiety went up. I mean, I just, all the symptoms of compassion fatigue and burnout. And I didn't recognize that immediately. I was at one church in Virginia for 6 or 7 years. And then I thought that going to a new congregation would kind of renew that and give me a sense of that groundedness again, and kind of newness, new opportunities. And I made that shift and found myself even more exhausted. And I'm pretty good at big picture and small details. And so it was often became my job, even if it wasn't technically my job in congregations, to plan community-wide events and congregation-wide events and to make those happen. That came naturally to me, and it exhausted me. I'm a very strong introvert, which I have realized more and more through COVID. The more time I spent by myself, the more I felt like I could offer my fullest self to other people in small doses. And so over a few year period, I was more and more burned out. I was exhausted. I was not sleeping well. I was waking up tired. And I finally realized, for my own mental well-being, physical well-being, that I had to make a shift.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I had just finished my doctorate of ministry at the Presbyterian Seminary here, and I knew they had a degree in marriage and family therapy, and so I decided to move back here where I had grown up. Had not really had plans to move back to Louisville, but moved back here and started that degree, and very intentionally set new rhythms for my life. This has felt like an entire restart for my life. And I now work with a lot of clients who are in helping professions, who are experiencing compassion fatigue and burnout. And I have very much been there. And I feel like at this point I've mostly recovered and come out on the other side, but there's still those moments that come up that where I will feel those feelings again and have to re-regulate. I just recently spent an entire weekend purposefully in solitude as a nervous system reset, and that's something I do every couple of months, just because I need a lot of quiet.
Yes.
Yeah. Go
ahead. No, you tell us.
Well, I was gonna look on my phone real quick. I found this quote just the other day, and I felt like it just, I was immediately drawn to it. It is me, and it says, sensitive people need downtime, not because they're weak, but because they experience life in high definition. Breaks are key to processing the world's vibrant colors, intricate patterns, and profound emotions. Embrace the quiet. It's where the magic of deep understanding happens. And that was from Jen Graneman, who wrote a book about highly sensitive people. And I just came across that, and I thought, I feel like I live life in high definition, high and deep emotion. And then it's like I get to the point where my body says, pause,
yes,
take a break.
Yes. And I identify with that too. Mm-hmm. I really feel like that sensitivity and the empathy is like a superpower, mm-hmm. but you have to know how to use the superpower and how to best take care of yourself in the midst of kind of having that superpower, because not everybody has that. And so when we expect everybody to show up, like, hey, don't you get this? Like, I mean, my friend group
that takes a lot of energy to do.
Yes. Yeah. And my friend group jokes because they're always like, oh, Megan, it's 9:00. Time for you're past your bedtime, like, because I'm also like that. But, one, you mentioned the word reset. You had kind of a reset. I want to plug my book, because if anybody's looking for, a reset, needing a reset, or thinking about a reset, the book that I wrote, Reset, the 6 Powerful Exercises to focus your attention on what works for you and what doesn't. It's on Amazon. So if you need help resetting, that's one option for you. Of course, we're here as therapists. I'm wondering, in the few minutes that we have left, you've talked a lot about nervous system, and I'm wondering if you could share with us just a little bit about what you know about your own nervous system, because you have found some really fascinating things out about yourself. So I wonder, maybe some people will identify with that.
Yeah. I think when I was a child, I was the sensitive person, the person who was occasionally, maybe often, told you're overreacting. And I grew up in a family that tended to think their way through things and not so much feel their way through things. And I didn't really know all this at the time, but I was very much a feeler. And so it felt like I had these huge emotions because the people around me were mostly thinking their way through things. And it took me well into adulthood to realize I probably had regular sized emotions that just felt outsized. And so, but yeah, I mean, I feel things deeply. I very much identify with the highly sensitive person traits. And for me, I think the word I always come back to when I need to regulate my own nervous system, when I'm starting to feel my heart rate go way up, I tend to have a really strong sense of my internal process. So I can usually feel my heart beat. I can feel if like heat is happening in my body, and my word that I come back to very often is pause. I even have a keychain that reminds me to pause.
I love it.
And for me, that getting a pause in when I'm about to either internally react to something or externally react to something, getting a pause in for a second allows my brain to kick in, and so that I can make an active decision. Do I want to respond like this, or am I about to react and probably say something I don't mean to say, or kind of lose track of my own nervous system? I feel like there's a point at which it's almost a point of no return.
Yes.
Of once it get escalated enough, it's hard to draw that back in immediately. At least that takes time.
Absolutely.
So for me, monitoring those deep feelings are really important to me, and monitoring how I'm responding to my internal world, but also especially the external world, and when I need to take a step back from that so that I can be more aware of what's happening and take that pause, and
yes,
and then be able to choose, this is how I want to be in this space.
Yes, very cool. Well, and I love hearing all this, and we're going to transition from this part 1 in episode 2 of season 2 to our next part, which Britt's going to talk to us a little about her own therapy, which is very fascinating, of the therapy that she's received and how she's come to learn all of this. And I love that you said all this, about taking the pause, because I feel like that is what mindfulness helps with, right? Like just becoming mindful of, I'm feeling something, or I'm thinking something, or I'm whatever that might feel a little off or dysregulated or big emotion or whatever the thing is. And years ago, I had a supervisor who told me, most people who come to therapy are introverted or highly sensitive or whatever, because they don't know how they're wanting to make sure they are normal, and that all these big feelings are normal, and that how do I exist in this world that doesn't receive me sometimes in the way that I wish that I was being received. So anything you want to say as we transition to our part 2 of this episode?
I don't think so. I think I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking about a world that is loud and bright and
100%. Yeah. Yes. I am right there.
And we don't want to dim that.
No, absolutely not.
So how do you mindfully live in the midst of that?
Yes. How do you best take care of yourself? Yes. Okay. So join us here in part 2, and we'll find out more juicy details about Britt's own therapy.